Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Rael Bricker, serial entrepreneur, author, speaker, and mentor. Please enjoy Rael Bricker. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I am super excited today to be chatting with Rael Bricker. He is here from Australia and he is a serial entrepreneur, author, speaker, and mentor. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mari.
Yes, you are welcome. I'm very excited to chat about creativity and hear all of the pieces you have from your experience and perspective. But before we get there, if you could share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started businesses on 2 continents, listed companies on 2 different stock exchanges, and everything philosophically that I've ever done in that space is around not overthinking things, just going, yeah, I think it's a good idea. Let's give it a go. And that's different from a shiny object syndrome. It's not a shiny object thing. It's thought and creativity that goes into it. But at a point, you have to make the decision to stop overthinking and just get on with it.
Yeah.
So I started a business in South Africa. I was a 26-year-old actually at the time, 26-year-old MBA grad, business school graduate. My partner was a business school graduate. We went out and thought we'd teach the world how to run their businesses. Of course, we'd never run a business ourselves. But that didn't really stop our thinking. I was just like, what the hell? We started that and we actually surprisingly won some contracts, which was even more bizarre. But for some reason, they dried up a couple months later and we were kind of at a loss. And somebody suggested, why don't you start a school, a college? So in the American sense, it would be a junior college sort of level. It was for kids who couldn't make it into university in South Africa. Majority of them were Black, underprivileged background. Within the context, that was 1990. That was the year Nelson Mandela was released. So Nelson Mandela was released. There was this hunger for education, for improvement in the majority previously disenfranchised community. And anyway, so we started this college. We knew nothing, but we had no money, but we found creative ways to advertise and get students. And we had 20 students in our first semester. And by the time we reverse listed it 5 years later, we had 6 campuses and 4,000 students.
Wow.
So, but it was about guerrilla marketing. It was about doing things differently to everyone else. Everyone else took a year to catch up with our leading edge stuff that we were doing. And so reverse listed that after being threatened with an AK-47. That's a whole different story.
That sounds like a whole different story.
And I decided I wanted out of that business. It was becoming too politicized. Education was becoming a very big political, hot potato. And I decided to get out, got into venture capital because we had done a whole lot of acquisitions for the business. So that process of mergers and acquisitions was something I was used to. Did that for a number of years. I came to Australia, joined a venture fund and listed them on the stock exchange, went around, did the listing. And then they wanted me to move to the East Coast. And pretty much like America, if you live on the West Coast, you want to live on the West Coast. It's a bit more chilled, laid back. Yes. So I stayed on the West Coast, and in 2001 went out on my own again. Started a financial services business by coincidence, and again, without design. I mean, that's the whole point. It's I was helping people raise money for their businesses, and they said, "Oh, we need a loan," and I went, "Okay, I have no idea how to get you a loan, but I'll go and find out." My late father once said to me, "An expert is not someone who knows all the answers. An expert is someone who knows where to find the answers." And
Good distinction.
Yeah, and I've always taught my staff. I've got 13 staff, and in the financial services business, I always taught them, the client doesn't expect you to know every answer. The client just expects you to be honest enough to say, "I don't know the answer, but I'll go and find out where what the answer is for you."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I went out, found out how to write loans, helped them get loans for their businesses. They said, "Great, can you get us a mortgage for our house?" I went, "I guess, why not?" And I went out and started a mortgage business in 2001 or late 2001. And I still own that business today. It's done over 3 billion. That's with a B.
Yes.
3 billion in mortgages in that period. I was the number 2 broker in the country at one stage.
Wow.
In 7.5, 8 years ago, I ended up with 2 cardiac stents while training for a marathon. And that bright light focused me on what I want to do, which is be on stage. So my mortgage business was built by me being on stage. So I gave seminars. I sold mortgages from stage to people who wanted to buy property, and sold over $1 billion of mortgages from stage. And so I wanted to extend that. And I realized that's my passion, is educating people. And so I became a professional speaker. I started professionally speaking 7 years ago, and currently a certified speaking professional. There are only 1,500 in the world, thereabouts, about 130 in Australia. And I'm currently president of Professional Speakers Australia in Western Australia. And I love that interaction with people. And COVID has taught me something else. Prior to COVID, I only did keynote speeches. So I'd fly in like cool places. Like I got to go to Kathmandu in Nepal, do an opening of a conference. And the next morning I drove with a guide, because I wasn't going to drive in Nepal, to go and see the sunrise over Everest. Okay. Right. And so you get to have those really cool experiences. But I realized there was nothing in it for me except money. But from a motivation point of view, over COVID, I started doing a lot more small group facilitation and small group workshops for 3 or 4 months, or 2-day workshops with companies. And suddenly I was getting fulfilled because I was seeing change, seeing change in people. And so that's my sort of 2022 focus onwards is that, yes, I love the keynotes. I love the adrenaline of being on the big stage. But I also absolutely love seeing the change in people by doing workshops and seminars on strategy, culture, and leadership.
That's amazing. I love all of it. And so much creativity you're talking about, pivoting to new industries, or taking on new things in a moment. There's so much creativity and curiosity. What your father shared with you, you don't need to know the answers if you can find the answers. That curiosity component of that is all about creativity. It speaks volumes to you as just
I'll give you one particular creative example, right? In South Africa, when we started our business, our target audience was very clearly defined as kids who had finished school. And so in South Africa was a weird system. The national results from what in America you call the SATs, but the year 12, the final year results were all national exams, and the results were released on one day nationally.
Wow.
Okay, we're not talking 300 million people like in America. We were talking, in truth, the school-going population, 35 million population of South Africa. So, a tiny percentage of people writing year 12. But what we did is we hired homeless people, we gave them money. We went and printed posters. We had no money to print properly. So we found an art studio that could print A0 or A1 posters for us in black and white. So just on a massive screen printer, just literally black with white cut out letters. nothing complicated. And all it said on it was, not happy with your results, call, and it gave our 800 number. Okay. Simple as that. But A0 and A1, that's massive. Okay. We hired all these homeless people in our 6 different cities.
Yeah.
My partner and I flew around to the 6 different cities, hired literally homeless people to work with our staff, gave them money. And there were a lot of homeless at the time, and there still are in South Africa.
Yeah.
They literally spent days gluing these onto pieces of board. And then the night the results were, the night before the results were released, so they were released on, say, a Tuesday morning, Monday night from midnight, we plastered every city that we had an office. Every lamppost had these massive posters that said, unhappy with your results, call this number. That was the turning point in that business.
Wow.
It was the essence of creativity, but the essence of simplicity.
Yeah.
That's, where I keep going on about people make a mistake of overthinking things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's such an important component. Creativity doesn't have to be complicated or difficult or hard. The most simple thing is the most creative.
Well, it's interesting. So when I was first emailing you before we, agreed to do this, I said, I'm not a traditional creative. My older daughter has worked in advertising agencies in the major cities around the world, and she's a copywriter. So she is creative. She is traditional creative, not a graphic design creative, but a copywriting creative, right? And I always go to her for advice because she hates my style of writing, but that's a separate conversation, okay? But what does it mean to be creative? It means, I think it means just to think outside the square.
Yeah.
To be able to turn the brain around. So I interviewed someone on my podcast recently who's the world's fastest reader.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's based out of Texas. And what he said to me was interesting. We were talking about speed reading and the process of speed reading, how the brain works. And he said to me, an interesting thing with people is when they try and be creative, they're trying to, and we're talking creative as in copywriting, okay?
Sure.
Right, or writing something, writing a book, writing a blog, doing that, right? They try and type and edit and be creative all at the same time.
Right, yeah.
And so it's left brain, right brain kind of fighting each other because the one's trying to edit and be creative.
Right.
And I do it a lot. I had done that a lot already, but he validated what I've always done. Is I've used a program like Otto or something like that, and I'll go for a walk like I did this morning before we recorded. And I had my headphones in and I was just recording on Otto for 40 minutes, my thoughts for some blogs, for my next book, for some marketing material. And by the time I've got into the office, my PA has pulled it off, put it into Word and ready for the other side of my brain to start editing it as opposed to the creative. So the creative was me walking in the park with my dogs.
Yeah.
Just allowing my thoughts to flow. So for me, that's what creativity is. It's allowing the thoughts to flow. It's overcoming the blocks that we have built up, and the psychologists would try and analyze where those blocks come from. And they make lots of money giving out drugs to people because, they've got all these mental blocks to things. But for me, that's what creativity is. It's about, I love photographs of the dawn.
Yeah.
Because I'm often out cycling or walking or running at that time of the morning. And I'll be out and I'll just see the sun coming through a tree and I'll walk around and find the right angle. Now, I love photography. That's another outlet of mine. But this is just iPhone photography.
Yeah.
And I'll go, that makes a nice picture. It's well framed by trees, but I'm not overanalyzing it. I'll look for the spot where I can take it with the sun coming through the tree. And I have a lot of those, or long shadows.
Yeah.
Do I use them? Yeah, I'll use them on my website occasionally and for blogs and things. But for me, that's just personal satisfaction of recognizing creativity around you, recognizing beauty around you.
I love that. And I appreciate you bringing up that aspect of kind of more personal creative experience and creative expression that isn't necessarily for other people, but that's how I believe how we keep our creative cup full, by doing the things that bring us joy that we're not really sharing with anyone else, so that when we do need to get to that point of coming up with a creative idea, our creative cup has been filled by the things that bring us joy.
Absolutely. My staff hate it when I walk in the morning and go, I was thinking, but then they know I've thought of some new ideas.
Right. And just the going on a walk and being able to talk, that is such a great way to spark creativity. Getting outside and being in nature is part of that. When they say how to spark creativity, that's just one of the ways that we do it.
Well, you're not trying to edit it. You're just trying to talk to yourself, and you wear headphones and you hold a phone. So everyone thinks you're on a conversation with someone else and not completely loony. But
right.
It works. And I often, when I'm delivering an opening keynote and I'm in a different city, I'll go for a run or a walk with headphones on, actually giving parts of my speech that I want to refine out loud while I'm running and walking. And I have headphones on just so that people think I'm talking to someone. But I use a lot of that time moving and exercising to refine my creativity.
Yeah. And you spoke briefly just a moment ago about, blocks that people experience, but I'm curious how you face creative challenges in your own life.
It's interesting because I've never seen myself as a traditional creative, that I didn't, for me, discovering Canva was the best thing ever because it's really easy. Okay. But I'm a person, because I have a software background, that, I've used all the fancy graphics going back to Corel Draw 25 years ago, but never really, probably ADHD kicked in, never really spent enough time really getting to know and understand the graphics. It's because it wasn't something that made me happy. It made me happy to get the big picture idea. How do I get around the blocks? Part of it is taking a break. So a couple of weeks ago, I flew over east to see my daughter. Now, you've been to Australia, but putting the size of the country into context, flying over east from here is LA to New York. It's that distance. It's in fact almost the same length of flight. So but I'd been so busy beforehand. I sat on the plane and I thought, I've got my laptop, I'll do some work. And I didn't open my laptop for the entire flight, just because my brain was tired.
Yeah.
But that same thing. So when I wrote my book in 2017, really was when I got the bulk. I wrote it in 2015 and then had a bit of imposter syndrome. In fact, a lot of imposter syndrome, as we all get.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God, no one wants to hear this story. And I put it away for 2 years. And then 2017, I met a publisher, my cousin's wife, and she said she loved it. Just write a few more words and we can publish it. So that was what happened in 2017, but I needed to finish the book. And I had a couple of international long haul flights for speaking. And so for me, I would get on the plane, put on headphones, put on some series in the background.
Yeah.
Just that way, no one bugs you because you've got noise canceling headphones on. No one wants to talk to you.
Right.
And that's how I finished writing my book. So even though I had this series playing distraction in the background, I could almost use that to block out other things and get to finishing the book. But interestingly, I have written a few blogs on it. I would be doing this, and suddenly a line would come up in a series. And there's a classic line, one I wrote a blog about recently, from the series called Billions. Okay. And I was watching, but not watching, like listening half in the background, doing other stuff. And Taylor in the series says to a backer of hers, oh, I'm going to be down there in the trenches fighting with my troops. That was the line she used, right? can't use the word she in the context of that series. It's got to be he, them, they.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, besides that point. Anyway, and the backer of Taylor says, no, that's the wrong approach to leadership. The problem with being in the trenches is that you're looking through the narrow scope of your rifle and you have a very narrow field. That's why they talk about leaders having sidearms, and leaders put their gun down and stand on top of the hill to look at the whole surrounding. That's what a true leader is. And so I was listening half in the background, doing some other stuff on the computer. I stopped, I opened up a new Word document, I rewound the video, got to that point, transcribed it as best I could, and that formed a series of blogs. So it had nothing to do with searching for something to break my creative block. It had, you've just got to be aware of your surroundings all the time, and that will give you enough creativity to do stuff.
Yeah, being open to it.
One line in that series went, yes, that is what leadership is about. And in fact, I mean, I'll flick something up on the screen, even though you're not using that. But my whole model of my business is around leadership, culture, and strategy, and the intersection between those. And so the truth of it is, that one line was broke a creative block and gave me 3 or 4 blogs.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that you were open to it, because I think sometimes people can have those moments where they hear something and they discount it, or they don't follow it. They hear and they think, oh, that's good, but what would I do with it? And the fact that you were open enough to say, oh, I'm going to do something with that is a difference.
Yeah, so that's exactly what it was. I wrote it down. I literally typed it out, saved it on my Dropbox, and about a week or 2 later, went back to it and went, okay, that was a good quote. Now, how am I going to formulate a series of blogs on leadership?
Yeah. When you think of leadership and creativity from the non-traditional creative world, where do you think creativity shows up in leaders or for leadership?
I think leadership is about creativity. Management is about systems and processes. So a lot of people who see themselves as leaders are actually good managers.
Yeah.
Right. I think in fact, I would say the best role of leadership is inspiration and inspiring people. So, again, principles I've got in my book, like, never ask people to do anything you wouldn't do. It sounds simple, but when you actually get down to what does that actually mean, it means you don't have to do the job anymore, because sometimes as leaders, we're better off doing the $1,000 an hour revenue generation and not the $20 an hour admin tasks. But when we started the business, we did both.
Right.
But you don't ever want to throw in your staff's face that you can do their job. I mean, lots of my staff look at me like I'm crazy when I say, what are you doing? Like, not because I'm looking over their shoulder, but I want to know how the processes have evolved since I last did them.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's about inspiring the team. It's about, it is about, yes, in creatively driving the direction of the business. Any business that stands static, and if nothing else, the pandemic of the last, couple of years has taught us that, those who stand still get crushed. Okay. You've got to keep moving. All right.
Right.
And so you keep moving, and the creativity of keeping moving is what inspires your staff. I once one of my staff who's been here now 14 years, 13 years, maybe. So she started here basically straight out of university and has been here ever since, and sort of my number 2 in command of the business and of the finance business. So I have my speaking business. I have this studio that I'm recording from. Next to me is a 14-seat hybrid classroom that I've set up with 3 cameras. This studio has a couple cameras, has video switching and all sorts of things. My classroom has 3 cameras in, so that I can run full, and I do run full hybrid sessions from there.
Mm-hmm.
people online, people in the classroom. Anyway, one of my staff turned around to me one morning and said, I woke up at 4 this morning worrying about a client. And she told me why. And I said, welcome to my world. I said, the fact that she woke up caring enough about our clients to worry about them at 4 o'clock in the morning means I've inspired her to the vision and mission of the business. And I don't particularly like vision and mission statements. I think they're things a lot of companies stick on the wall and don't mean anything. I prefer values. I prefer trying to articulate the values and purpose of the organization. But she'd bought into that, to the values of the organization, and was evidenced by her waking up at 4 in the morning worrying about a client.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, to hear you say you're not a traditional creative, and then to hear all of the things that you've talked about, I would say you are absolutely a traditional creative. It might not be in the form of dance or art, but to be on stage and be a speaker, to teach, to run a business, to be a leader, there's so much creativity that goes into that, seemingly non-creative spaces. But being able to bring that creativity into them brings, I think, more aliveness, and people invest more because they have that connection to it. If you were to encourage others to find creativity in their business or in their life, how would you do that?
So I actually do a lot of that as a coach, as a mentor. And so I did 2 weeks ago, before I went traveling, 2.5 weeks ago, I ran a strategy session, a one-day strategy program called Is Your Planning Upside Down? For a financial services and accounting practice. Okay. And it was interesting because I like simple. And so I have what I call a plan on a page. And I teach companies how to have a single business plan on a one-page plan. It's not a document of 50 pages that sits and gathers dust till next year. But working with that group of accountants, it was drawing out of them. That's great. I understand your numbers. Now put the numbers away and let's talk about the soft stuff. The soft stuff is the hard stuff. And it's a process. So I actually am seeing that group again. I had a follow-up a week after that, before I went away. I'm following up with them again on Tuesday or Wednesday next week to follow this process where I'm starting to get them to close the spreadsheet down and look at the people and look at the other aspects around them. So that's one way of being. I mean, as entrepreneurs, I think you have to be creative. You have to, a lot of the guys who go around the world, teaching entrepreneurs, which of course I think is a problem in the first place. I don't think you can teach entrepreneurship. They'll go, you have to have a singular focus and that's what you focus on. But as soon as you do that, you lose the big picture, exactly like that episode of Billions. Yeah. Okay. You do have to have a singular focus at a point, because you can't have that shiny, we started talking about right at the beginning, shiny object syndrome. Right. You can't have shiny object syndrome. You do have to have a focus, but it's okay to shift your focus. The back of this book, the book that I published, says, business doesn't have to be complicated. Business can be simple. Take a breath, dive in, and adjust the course while you're moving. Great. That's exactly philosophically where I sit. So that's how I talk to people about being creative. Creativity is not necessarily about coming up with new ideas. Creativity is problem solving. It's solving the problem that you have now and adjusting the solution to your current circumstance. Nice. This has been such a fantastic conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I just have one last question for you. Yes. What does it feel like in your body to be creative? That's what drives me. So at the start of COVID, as an example, until the start of COVID, we all did Zoom from our desks. And that was about it. And then I went, okay, I'm a professional speaker. I need to be able to offer people a professional solution. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so a professional solution that's, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the screen now, there's a slide showing up with me in the top corner talking, but to a particular PowerPoint slide that happens to come up, and then I can flick back to me on the big screen and all those things. So yes, I have a tech background, but I got creative about how to develop the best technology without spending a ton of money. You could go out and spend $50,000 and have an amazing studio. I spent less than $1,000 and recycled old computers to get to the technology that I have now. So that creativity, that spark of ingenuity is what drives me on a daily basis. I'm always thinking about things and new ways to do things. Sometimes I think too much and don't sleep, completely different conversation.
Yes.
But I think that's what it makes me feel. It makes me feel alive. I see when you get onto public transport, and I have to admit, I don't catch much public transport in Australia. But when I travel the world, I use lots of public transport.
Yeah.
And you get onto public transport at 8 o'clock in the morning in London is a good example. I've probably used the tubes in London more than anywhere else in the world. And you see all these people who are expressionless, almost comatose, robotic, going to their place of work. And you almost feel a pity or a sorrow. And then you'll see the occasional person who skips onto the tube. And that might be because they're dancing to the music, but it doesn't matter. They could have music in their ears or they could have music in their head. It doesn't matter.
Right.
But they have an excitement about what they're going to do. To me, that the day that I got onto a tube or a train and I was in that robotic state, it's time to move on.
Yeah. I love it. I love the aliveness and the creativity, how it shows up and drives.
Mine is driven by exercise. Like if I don't exercise every day, I'm grumpy. My wife will send me out on a Sunday afternoon and go, "You didn't exercise today. Go to gym, go for a run, go for a walk, do something." But do something. Get the adrenaline flowing, get the endorphins flowing. So for me, the endorphins and the adrenaline are what drives my creative side. Okay.
Nice. I love it. So important.
But it's also your time out. It's the time out where you actually, unless I'm walking the dogs and recording stuff, but if I'm running or cycling or anything else, I'm not really thinking about anything to do with work. I'm just clearing the brain. I'm clearing the memory.
Yeah. Such an important part of creativity as well. But thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. And if people want to learn more about the work you do, find your books, connect, how could they go about doing that?
My website is easy. It's raelbricker.com. And something that's not on the homepage, but if they go to raelbricker.com/freebook, they can actually download a PDF copy of Dive In, Lessons Learned Since Business School. It was the first 30 years of my entrepreneurial journey.
Amazing. I will put that on the show notes.
Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't use Twitter very much. But those three media, and email me rael@raelbricker.com with any questions or anything they'd like to know.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for taking the time. It's been such a treat to chat with you about creativity.
It's been a pleasure. It's been creative and it's been fun.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.